talk about religion in a very controversial way. Uh, what do I think? What do I really think? Sometimes when I was a kid, I used to always think about religion. And I still think, I think I've thought about it all my life. I don't think there's been I was used to think about it a long time ago and then I stopped. I always think about it because I really ask the question. You know, I don't think for me it's really a question, is there a God? I accept that there is a God. That part, I'm not a skeptic with that. But what I do ask is, what is God exactly? What is God? And that kind of gets me into a lot of other questions, like, what am I? What are all of us? Are we what we appear to be? Are we these bodies that we live in? Are we something else? Because even this is a mystery. Even what we take in through our senses is a mystery. To me, when I think about God, I don't really so much think in terms of empirical. God is not an empirical thing. And if it's not empirical, it's not scientific. God is not subject to scientific inquiry. But, we understand God more in an existential sense. And when I think about existential, I think about all the stuff I read about, when I was reading Jean-Paul Sartre and being in nothingness and the whole existential thing, not so much the details of his philosophy, but just that fact that there is that part of it, that element of things, consciousness. Our being is consciousness. Just think about it. It's not just so much the physical reality of us, but it's the fact that we are conscious of ourselves as being. If you ever read Being in Nothingness, and if you can get through all the very complicated ways in which he says things and all the difficult part to give people brain cramps, I think what you're going to discover is that ultimately it's really what we're conscious of. God is something you're conscious of. Even if you actually saw God as a person, and let's say God looked like George Burns or something, you still have to be conscious that this is God and not an imposter or somebody bullshitting or blowing smoke up your ass. You have to really believe this is God. So ultimately, it's your consciousness of this as God. For a lot of people, you can see God in everything. You can see God in, when I'm looking at Lake Michigan, I see God in that. I see God in the clouds. And I don't mean some image like, some old guy with a beard and mustache or something like that. But you see, I think even using the word see God in something is probably a bit misleading because I'm not actually seeing things. I'm not seeing Jesus in a piece of toast or something. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being conscious of God. I'm conscious of God in things. And this even gets me into some design issue. And this is not even so much the intelligent design, which I think is bullshit. When these people try to pass that stuff off as science. But there is a kind of God's design in some way. Maybe that's the best word I can think of. And maybe there's a better word for it. But I know what some people can really mean when they say that. That God designed the universe. In the sense that there are things that we design ourselves with an intention. There's something we intend. I think ultimately what God really intends is for us to be happy, to be at peace, to be happy, to be fulfilled, to have a sense of fulfillment, and to truly be everything that we can be, to actualize our potential. I think ultimately that's what God really is. And I think that that's what I experience when I experience God, is when I'm being my best, when I'm doing the best that I can, when I'm serving people. And I mean that in a very positive way, because some people hate the idea of serving others. They feel like that makes them less. To be a servant, to be a slave. I never think of it that way. I think of serving others as a beautiful thing, as an honorable thing. To be at the service of my fellow human beings, and to be at service even of all life forms. It can be in service of the trees or even animals. There are people who love animals, and there are people who like to grow things and grow flowers and things like that. I think all those ways You experience God through those activities. And the bottom line about God is what you experience. It's what you experience, not even what your senses tell you. You see, the five senses are not all of our experience. When you love someone, you may think in terms of when you touch a person, or the smell of that person, or the way they sound, the sound of their voice, or things like that. All the things that you take in through your five senses. But love isn't any one of those things. But it is something you experience. There are experiences more than just the five sense experiences. There are other experiences. There are things, it's like when you experience beauty, it's not just what your senses tell you. I think just like David Hume said, beauty is in the mind that contemplates it. It's something in your mind. But being in the mind, whenever we say that something is in a person's mind, we usually mean that in a negative way. Like, oh, it's all in your mind, which means it's not real. But everything that we experience has to be processed through the mind. Everything I'm looking at, everything I'm hearing, everything I smell, it has to come in through the nervous system. It has to be processed in the mind. If I don't process it, I don't experience it. And the same thing is true with God. God is something you have to experience. Your mind is processing it. Maybe it's a hallucination. Maybe it is a delusion, as Richard Dawkins says. I don't know. And I don't think I ever really know that. And I don't think he really knows that. But it is something you experience. Ultimately, God is something you experience. And that's the truth. I'm not here to argue about or promote some type of supernatural thing. I don't think you have to get supernatural or get into that sort of thing to get into God. I think it's just something that happens in the way you live your life every day. It's in the way that you do everything. And it's being conscious of things, and it's being appreciative of everything, and it's being aware of the fact that you came from something and that you're going somewhere. And that's what matters. And that is my idea about God.